Today's case is one that we have covered before, but as the case has unfolded over the past couple of years, more has come out. Now, I thought it would be important to do a full video explaining everything and including the conclusion of the case. It is truly one of the worst cases I have ever covered. It is absolutely sickening, angering, and really eye-opening, especially if you are a parent. Please listen with caution as this includes some very heavy details. So today we are going to fully go over the case of 47-year-old Denny and 38-year-old Cynthia Perkins. Hey guys, I'm Annie Elise. This is 10 to Life. Let's dive right in. Cynthia Perkins was born to Gregory and Angela Thompson on April 13, 1985. She grew up with two siblings, a sister named Patricia and a brother named Paul, and from what I was able to find, she seemed to have a pretty normal childhood. Cynthia grew up and eventually got married to a man named James Jones, and the two of them shared 3 children together, named Alyssa, Carter, and Evan. Their family lived in Louisiana, and in 2012, she started teaching at Live Oak Middle School. In 2013, she transferred to North Live Oak Elementary School, and in 2016, she transferred to West Side Junior High School, where she stayed teaching until 2019. But we need to go back a little bit here, because at some point in time, James and Cynthia got a divorce. After that, Cynthia met and quickly fell in love with Dennis, who also goes by Denny, Perkins. Denny was born to Dennis Warren Perkins and Rebecca Allen on August 13, 1975. He grew up and began working in the law enforcement field. He then got with a woman named Darla Gale Hood. The two of them welcomed a son named Devin Perkins together. They ended up splitting up after some allegations of domestic disputes in the home, and these allegations came to light in a pretty large way, and so they split. In 2011, Darla filed what seems to be a couple of different court filings. In one filing, Darla wrote that Denny was caught conducting surveillance on her boyfriend's home in his unmarked police patrol car. Now, Darla believed that he had been there most of the night due to his eyes being completely bloodshot red when she confronted him. And when he was confronted about being there, his response was, "Isn't this a free country?" Which, yes, Denny, it is, but it's really creepy to use your freedom to lurk on other people and sit in your parked patrol car out front all night. It's weird. Now, in the document filed, Darla also wrote that Denny would make harassing phone calls and send harassing text messages. He had also allegedly installed a keystroke logger on her computer, all in an effort to get access to her private and personal accounts. After he would get access, he would read her emails and contact any of the men that she spoke to, telling them that they needed to leave her alone. And worst of all, he seemed to use their shared child as a pawn in all of this jealousy and control. He would frequently threaten to take their son away from her and not allow her to see him anymore. Now, obviously, Denny seems like a horrific, control freak, jealous asshole. Let's just call it what it is. So Darla ended up remarrying, and honestly, not surprisingly, Denny did too. He married a woman named Shannon Jackson, which ended in divorce as well. There is also potential that he married one other woman named Randy. However, I haven't been able to find confirmation of that, just a couple of rumors here and there. But regardless, all of those relationships failed, and then Denny and Cynthia ended up together. The two ran off and got married in Vegas on December 7th, 2018. At the time, Denny was the head of the SWAT team for Livingston Sheriff's Office, and Cynthia was still teaching middle school. So from the outside, they seemed like such a great couple. Two people who, despite their prior failed marriages, seemed absolutely head over heels in love with each other, both working in respectable career fields and a combined 4 beautiful children together. So what could be wrong with that? Well, that all came to a massive halt in 2019, when all of the hidden, disgusting secrets came to the surface. Now, as we all know, darkness, most of the time, will always come to light, and boy did it ever in this case. On September 23, 2019, the Louisiana Bureau of Investigation received a cyber tip report. The tip was sent by the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, and it contained information about possible distribution of images of children being harmed in a sexual manner. When the LBI agents traced the IP of the images that were being uploaded to Adobe, the IP was associated with Denny and Cynthia's home on Rosalie Drive in Denham Springs. They conducted an electronic search warrant, which gave agents a shocking revelation. The search warrant, not surprisingly, showed inappropriate photos of children. Not only that, but there was tons of media showing children being harmed, Denny pleasuring himself and then releasing those bodily fluids onto pastries, which, yes guys, meaning he literally excreted, came on cupcakes, and also images of him exposing his own private parts in public. On October 22, 2019, Denny was nearly 4 hours away from home on a fishing trip and clearly was just kind of living his life as if he had done nothing wrong. And he was then contacted on his work cell phone, and LBI set up a meeting point to talk with him. While en route, he called on a different phone and changed the meeting place. Now, it should be noted that Denny was driving his patrol car during the time that all of this was going down, which was not a vacation car and should have not been taken out that far of the county. Denny agreed to the line of questioning, but let them know that he had thrown his cell phone into the lake prior to meeting with them. Now, in case anyone doesn't know, which I'm sure all of you guys do, especially you true crime buffs out there and you sleuths, if someone is throwing their phone into a lake, it is quite the indication that they have an idea of what's about to go down, at least in my opinion. They know that something's about to go down, so they're trying to destroy evidence. So initially, Denny was cooperating and answering the questions. However, as soon as the questions got to the images that were found, he requested an attorney. He was arrested on an obstruction of justice charge for the phone toss and then was later transported back to Livingston Parish and also arrested on those LBI warrants, which we will get into shortly. At the same time he was being confronted at Toledo Bend, another search warrant was being executed. But this time, it was at his home in Denham Springs. During the search warrant, officers found tons of electronics. And what was on those electronics was an absolute gut punch. Horrifying, disgusting, and a complete shock to everyone. Now, I want to warn you that from here on out, the language will get pretty graphic and could possibly even be triggering, so please listen with caution. During the search warrant, law enforcement found approximately 60 images of a young girl aged 12, who we will call victim number 1. In the legal world, images could mean photo or video. These images, though, weren't just normal images. These were clearly sexual in nature. And not only was Denny in these images, but Cynthia was in them too. The images clearly showed this young girl's private area and showed her engaging in oral and things being done to her private areas with adult fingers, some sodomy action. There were images of Denny placing his genitalia inside this young girl's mouth, while Cynthia was holding this young girl's head. Just absolutely sickening. There were also images of Denny actually and penetrating this young girl. Images of him placing his penis inside of her. Just horrifying. Now, to do this is already disgusting and dehumanizing, but to use a camera during this and having this documentation and evidence that you can look back on and get off to later is just a whole nother level of sickening. Now, later in the evening, on the night of that search warrant taking place, an unsuspecting Cynthia showed up at her home, where she was met by agents for the LBI who were wanting to question her. Cynthia agreed to the line of questioning, but when she was shown the images that they had found of victim number 1, the young girl, she immediately stopped speaking. The agents quickly obtained for an arrest warrant for 62 counts, including 60 counts of images of a child under the age of 13. Both of them were being held in the Livingston Parish Jail, and over time, the final count of the charges and information about them were revealed, and it was revealed in an affidavit, bringing the grand total to 150 charges, all between the two of them, which they, of course, pled not guilty to. But as I read further into this affidavit, I was even more enraged reading about the things that occurred in that house of disgust and house of horrors. The victims included 2 children, 2 adults, and get this, even a dog. Have you heard the term bestiality, guys? If you haven't, Google it, but it's disgusting. Now, according to the document, during intercourse between Cynthia and Dennis, on at least one occasion, they had victim number 1, this 12-year-old girl, hold Denny's penis at the same time. And Denny didn't just prefer human interaction. In a video obtained by the LBI, Denny was half naked and decided to pleasure himself while positioning his rectum in his dog's mouth. Yes, you heard that right. His dog. A absolute sicko. There were videos of Denny relieving himself, so to speak, into energy drinks and into cupcake batter, which were eventually consumed by people without their knowledge. And more specifically, the cupcakes were given to Cynthia's students, and there was photographic evidence of that. So, just to pause. First of all, we have to say, what the hell is wrong with people in this moment? But this creep and his wife not only were documenting all of these foul and disgusting things they were doing, but then, as he was relieving himself from the pleasure into this cupcake batter, Cynthia bakes the cupcakes, takes them to school, and feeds them to her student class of kids in junior high, without obviously telling them what was in them. It is sick. There was also another minor girl in these images who was identified as victim number 2, and she was under the age of 17, and she was seen in the images and the videos that were discovered. In the affidavit, there was a long section that explained other things that they had done as well, although they weren't necessarily being charged for them in efforts to basically prove motive, intent, and similar things. In that section, there were many things explained. The first one described was titled Role Play. The section explained that around April 19th, 2019, Denny recorded a video of him and Cynthia having sex from behind. During that video, Cynthia was wearing a schoolgirl skirt, which is believed to have belonged to victim number 1, the 12-year-old girl. Denny also referred to Cynthia by name as victim number 1's name in this video. During the video, Cynthia could be heard speaking in a creepy, babyish type of voice and said some really disturbing things to him, such as to relieve himself on her butt, then tells him to get some on her skirt, on her school skirt, because she's like a dirty little schoolgirl, just seriously deranged. The document stated that the video was created during the same time frame too that they were doing these things to victim number 1, as though they were almost trying to relive it, reenact it, get off on it one more time. The LBI agents found a note that Cynthia had also created on her phone, and this note was from May 8th, 2019. This note was a fantasy note about the 12-year-old girl. Part of the note reads, "We explained to her our daughter has been a really bad girl. We explained that our daughter is too young to be punished. Therefore, we found her for this reason. She will receive the punishments that our daughter deserves. She tries to explain that she is still only 11 years old, but tomorrow is her 12th birthday." Now, there was much more to that note, such as discussing how the young girl would be bound and gagged while Denny did stuff, and Cynthia even wrote in her little sex fantasy note that the young girl would be silently crying and have tears streaming down her face during all of this. Which honestly, while researching, I had to take a break after that section because I was absolutely disgusted by this, and it is just appalling. Now, I know it is often said that perpetrators typically have an age that they prefer to do things to, and these certain aged victims. So it makes me think about Cynthia's young daughter and what could have, but hopefully did not, happen to her. In a forensic interview that victim number 1 did in early September 2019, she did explain some of the things that Cynthia had done to her prior to when the more sexual things began happening. She said that 3 years prior, Cynthia dragged her by her hair into the bathroom, slammed her face against the wall, and threw her to the ground before slapping and hitting her. She also said that she once woke up to Cynthia sitting on her bed and looking at her with a very mean face. She also stated that Cynthia would blame her for the problems that she had had in her previous relationships, as if it was this young girl's fault. She blamed a literal child for her own failed relationships. So the agents uncovered searches that Denny had made on his devices in regards to the children as well. Some of these searches included pretend to sleep while drunk stepdad F's me, a search about relieving yourself on a sleeping stepdaughter, wank in car next to a school bus, a YouTube search titled looking up dresses, and even more. There were also photoshopped images found on Denny's devices. These were normal, everyday images of children that had been altered, all to satisfy Denny's disgusting obsession with young children. All of these photos had been taken by Cynthia, and they were sent to Denny. Some of the photos included things like children yawning, in which Denny would then Photoshop his penis onto their mouths. Or there would be photos of children sitting at sporting events with their legs slightly spread apart, in which he would again Photoshop in his penis between their legs, which is very creepy, but also just feels very like juvenile. Like, why are you taking these images and like Photoshopping yourself in them? I don't know. It just feels weird all the way around. There was a section in the affidavit titled The Banana Video, and this section explained that there was a video created by Denny of victim number 1. In the video, she was kneeling next to the back door with a banana. Denny stood there and gave her verbal commands of what to do to the banana, such as pretending like she was choking on it, pretending that she was licking it, and then biting the tip of the banana. There were also 17 photos found of victim number 2, all taken in March of 2019 in their driveway. In these photos, Denny had zoomed in on her private areas, and his obsession with taking these photos and then these videos as well, and then editing himself in to satisfy himself, again, is just so weird, but it was a constant habit that he apparently was doing. But Denny's obsession went even further, if you can believe it. According to an old partner of Denny's, he had purchased a watch that had a hidden camera in it. It could also be referred to as a spy watch. Denny had designated a specific bathroom in his home to be used by the women in it, which, first of all, is just a massive red flag in itself. But this ex-partner of Denny's was able to put the pieces together, that anytime a young girl was going in there to shower, he would leave that watch in there on the counter, all to record it. It was clear that he was gathering footage with it. When confronted by this woman, his ex-partner, Denny absolutely lost his mind. He apparently smashed the watch to pieces, which, in my opinion, getting that angry when you're confronted about something like that only makes you look even more guilty, especially if then you were smashing the watch. If it weren't true, why smash the watch? Why try to get rid of the evidence? And why get so angry? Denny didn't just use his own devices, though, to complete his sick agenda. He also used the devices of the Livingston Sheriff's Office, which was also, remember, the place of his employment. When one of the deputies conducted an extraction from an external hard drive that was found at Denny's home, they found a DVD that showed a young girl undressed in the bathroom. Denny also derived pleasure from doing things next to sleeping girls. In 2013, Denny took a video of a young girl sleeping. The camera was angled up her shorts. In the video, Denny was pleasuring himself the entire time. Toward the end of the video, he released his sperm right next to her legs. Just around 2 weeks later, he made 2 more videos. This time, there were 2 girls. Denny once again angled the camera up their shorts and decided it would be an appropriate time to, once again, start pleasuring himself. At the end of the video, the agents were able to see Denny's bodily fluids go onto the bed near the girl's feet. Then he covered it with a comforter. Not only did Denny use work devices as well, he also had proven misconduct during his shifts. In 2012, Denny pulled a woman over while he was on the job. While she was searching for her license, Denny was videoing her and zooming the camera down her shirt in an attempt to video her breasts. She then leaned over and lifted her bottom off the seat so that she could search the passenger side. So Denny quickly moved the camera down and pointed it up her jean shorts in effort to get footage of her vaginal area, as she was not wearing any underwear at the time. He did that 3 times and kept encouraging her to find her license, keep bending over, keep leaning over. So the woman, who was clearly unaware that she was being recorded and was being used as a target for his desires, complied unknowingly. It seems as if Denny and Cynthia sought pleasure from acting out their sick and twisted fantasies in a way where they were risking being caught. Because in another video that was obtained, Denny and Cynthia engaged in more behavior on a plane, all while videoing themselves. Now, it's disgusting enough to have sex in an airplane bathroom, and I'm saying that not because you're actually having sex, but because of the bacteria in the bathroom and all of that. That's pretty gross to me. But these two sickos did it in a way where others could see them doing it. Cynthia was performing oral on Denny, and when a flight attendant passed by, they quickly hid what they were doing. After the attendant passed by, they then continued their public act, trying to hide with a blanket and act as though it wasn't happening, which that's a pretty ballsy move to literally perform oral sex on a plane, in your seat, in a row where people are in front of you, behind you, and across from you. It's a pretty ballsy move. Denny and Cynthia's misconduct also didn't just involve children. They also had adult victims, who we will now call Adult Victim 1 and Victim 2. According to the affidavit, Adult 1 had visited Denny and Cynthia's home with a friend. While there, Denny began asking everyone about their special sexual talents. That's a direct quote. The friend of Adult 1 began feeling extremely uncomfortable, and her response to the question was reading people. Then she left the home due to feeling super uncomfortable. But her friend, Adult Number 1, stayed, and she told Denny that performing oral was her special talent. Adult Number 1 later did an interview with LBI in which she disclosed another incident that had happened toward the end of 2018. Adult Number 1 said that she had gone to their home with her young daughter. She said that she had something to drink and then she fell asleep. The next morning, she woke up in Cynthia's daughter's room, but she had no recollection of what had gone down the night prior. When she asked Cynthia what had happened, all Cynthia told her was, "I took care of you." Both Cynthia and Denny were charged for that incident, as that woman was sadly taken advantage of and it had been captured on video. The fact that this woman didn't remember anything makes me think that there was likely some drugging that occurred. During that search warrant at the house, many drugs were collected, such as muscle relaxants, multiple insomnia medications, Percocet, antihistamines with side effects of drowsiness, and common cold and flu medicines that also have side effects of drowsiness. There was also a text thread found in which Denny and Cynthia had mentioned a scenario in which something had been put in another female's drink. My guess is that Adult Number 1 had been drugged and maybe didn't know what specifically had happened to her until law enforcement found that video. There was also a video acquired in which Denny and another woman, who was unnamed and unknown at the time of his arrest, were taking advantage of Adult Number 2 in a sexual manner back in 2014. Part of the investigation included looking into Denny's career history. In July of 1998, at the age of 22, Denny applied for the Baton Rouge Police Department. At the time, part of their hiring process included taking a polygraph test. For the questions he answered yes to, he had to write explanations along with them. Now, the things he wrote were truly appalling, and I have absolutely no clue how he got hired. Denny wrote during this that when he was 18, he engaged in misconduct with a girl and later found out that she was 13 at the time, which, I'm sorry, but excuse me, a young 13-year-old girl, especially back in the 90s, looked nowhere near an adult. He also wrote that in 1995, he showed his penis for some beads at Mardi Gras, which there are definitely plenty ways to get beads. He just kind of has this history of wanting to expose himself and sexualize everything he comes into contact with, apparently. During this question and interview, he also wrote that 3 years prior he had paid for oral sex and solicited sex, and that 3 weeks prior to the polygraph, he had solicited intercourse. He also had recently committed credit card fraud by trying to enter a random credit card number online. The fraud attempt was unsuccessful, though. He also admittedly wrote that he had previously looked through his then sister-in-law's window multiple times while she undressed, all to get a peek, as he wrote. He admitted that he had sent photos of a girl to a website, which thankfully those were never posted, and he also wrote that he had previously had sex with a girl while on duty. So he's in this police interview, trying to get this job, answering this polygraph, answering more in depth for the questions that he's saying yes to. Bravo for being honest, but thinking that he was still going to get hired, which is the craziest part. During his interview with the police department, the board members took notes on him, on all of these answers, and some of the notes mentioned things like him having a poor attitude, immaturity, having difficulty answering law enforcement questions, not considering victims' feelings in scenarios that they gave, his feeling of it being okay to do illegal activity as long as you aren't getting caught, his admissions of his crimes, his poor judgment, and just so much more. And one board member even wrote, "needs to grow up," in his summary area on the document. Every board member unanimously agreed not to hire Denny, with one even writing, "definitely do not hire," in the recommendation spot. So I truly wonder how he was then able to get so high up the chain in the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office that he became the head of SWAT. Typically, people don't change their ways very much, as evidenced by his years-long obsession over women and young girls. So it makes me wonder what he could have possibly pulled to get to the career position that he was in when he was arrested. Denny was, of course, fired upon his arrest, and Cynthia resigned the day after hers. However, that didn't stop their current places of employment from receiving backlash. During the investigation, the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office received quite a bit of heat when people started realizing that it seemed as if Denny's previous questionable behavior had been completely ignored. More specifically, it seemed as if Sheriff Jason Ard had potentially ignored some huge red flags. For instance, that polygraph in 2002, when Denny had to do the polygraph test during his interview process for the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office. When he took that test, he was labeled a high-risk hire, but the then Deputy Jason Ard vouched for him and said that he would make an excellent employee and said that he was of good character. In 2013, another incident occurred that now seems to have maybe been overlooked. Lieutenant Todd Webb from Baton Rouge PD went to Sheriff Ard with some concerns about Denny. Todd said that his then stepdaughter had recently had a sleepover at Denny's home. His daughter was friends with another child who was at the home at the time. In the complaint documents, it says that Denny's wife at the time, who was not Cynthia, awoke to find Denny laying in bed with the girls watching a movie. She called the girl's mom and explained the situation. It didn't say what about him laying there with them led her to call the mom, but maybe she just had a gut feeling. The little girl, of course, never returned to their home. After that, Todd and his then wife immediately sent the little girl to a counselor. She disclosed to the counselor that Denny would chase her into a room, hold her down, and play Tickle Monster. He then scheduled the meeting with Sheriff Ard and relayed his concerns and told him that he didn't want Denny anywhere near him or his family. A couple of days later, he went to a gas station with his family, and Denny slowly rolled around them in what he believed to be an intimidation tactic. He then had to go up the chain of command to ensure that the behavior would stop. But because what Denny did to that little girl wasn't technically illegal, no disciplinary measures were taken. Illegal? Maybe not. But creepy behavior that aligned with grooming? Absolutely. In 2014, another complaint had been made by what seems to be another law enforcement officer at the Baton Rouge Police Department. This officer claimed that his wife had recently had an affair with Denny and that his daughter was also tickled by Denny. Just seriously creepy. Stop tickling young girls. On the flip side of this, 4 lawsuits were filed relating to Dennis, Cynthia, and her school board. One lawsuit was filed by a mom whose little girl had ingested those contaminated cupcakes. She listed in her lawsuit that the school board violated school policies in regards to teachers bringing homemade edible goods for students. She also alleged that the school board failed to hire a safe and competent teacher, failed to check Cynthia's background prior to employment, and failed to use the proper procedures to ensure students' safety. The mother also claimed quality of life damage in this. More specifically, she said that she is worried about her daughter getting AIDS or something similar, loss of consortium, emotional distress, and other damages and losses that she would show should the lawsuit go to trial. Another lawsuit filed stated that the father, after learning his student had ingested these laced cupcakes, had fallen into a deep depression and was unable to find gainful employment. One mother filed a suit saying that they had been dealing with behavioral, mental health, and sleep issues since everything had gone down. A fourth lawsuit stated that Cynthia had shown the students inappropriate photos and had also taken photos and videos of the student. Each one of those lawsuits listed the school board and claimed negligence on their end. On December 19, 2019, Cynthia filed for a divorce from Denny. In her divorce petition, she alleged that Denny had made sufficient threats against her life and that she was fearful. She also asked for a temporary restraining order within that filing, which, you heard that right, she wanted a restraining order, even though they were both in jail, being held without bond, and both being charged with these crimes. And just when everyone thought that it couldn't get any worse, it did. In February 2020, a third person was arrested in this whole scheme. Melanie Curtin, a woman also from Denham Springs, was identified as the unknown woman who was taking advantage of adult number 2 with Denny back in November of 2014. She was arrested as she came off of a cruise ship, and she was immediately transported to the Livingston Parish Jail. Her bond was set at $350,000. She did bond out a few days later, but she was required to wear a GPS monitor as part of her bond conditions. Now get this, Melanie had also worked for the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office. She worked in the tax department for around 18 months in between 2011 and 2012. At the time of her arrest, she was married, and her husband Jason was a former deputy with the Livingston Sheriff's Office. In December of 2021, she went to trial. Her trial consisted of her attorneys trying to argue that she was drugged and had no recollection of the incident. She had gone to the hospital that night for what she thought was an allergic reaction, and also tried to use that to her advantage. But the prosecution had a nearly 20-minute video showing Melanie willingly participating in this disgusting crime. During the trial, the victim spoke out. She said that she never even knew what happened until the video was found during the search warrant. In the video, the victim had a blanket over her head and was believed to be completely unconscious. It is no wonder that she had no clue what happened to her. She also said that Denny had previously suggested a threesome and that the thought of that made her uncomfortable. She had zero recollection of the filmed incident and said that she wanted to literally die when she was shown some of the video footage. It seemed like she was likely drugged, and to me it seems plausible that Denny may have suggested a threesome, that she said no, so then he drugged her so that he and Melanie could fulfill their sick desires. The trial, which was a camera-free zone, lasted about 2 days, and the jury deliberated for nearly 8 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Guilty for aggravated assault in a sexual manner and video voyeurism. Melanie began loudly screaming when the verdict was returned. Her attorney requested that she stay out on bond so that she could make arrangements for her children, but the judge denied that request, and she was immediately taken into custody to wait for sentencing, and she was removed from the courtroom. The video was what sealed the deal for the guilty verdict.
That was our main piece of evidence. It was possibly the strongest piece of evidence I've ever seen in a criminal case, and yeah, that was our case.
On February 14, 2022, Cynthia decided to take a plea deal. The plea deal included 3 charges: second-degree assault in a sexual manner, mingling of harmful substances, and a count of production of child images. As a condition of her plea deal, she would need to testify against her ex-husband Denny, and in exchange, she would be sentenced to 41 years. During her sentencing, Cynthia spoke, and she said, "I just want to apologize. I want to tell you I'm sorry. I want to tell the entire parish of Livingston Parish I'm sorry. I want to tell my friends, my coworkers, I'm sorry. I want to tell my family, my mom, and my dad that I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't come to y'all. I'm sorry. To my brother and sister-in-law, I love you. Of course, I want to apologize to the victims. I want to apologize to my students and everyone I ever taught, because they now have to worry about what happened. I would also like to apologize to my 3 children. I have not spoken to them in years. I cannot imagine the hurt that they feel. And the last person that I would like to apologize to is the father of my children, my soulmate. I'm so sorry that you're having to raise our children on your own. It's not fair to you. You don't deserve this, and I'm sorry. And honestly, there is nothing else to say at this point other than I am so sorry. Which is interesting to me that she called her ex-husband her soulmate and said that he was having to raise their children alone, because her ex-husband is remarried and the children are being raised in a happy blended family. And what seems to be a normal blended family with no sick behaviors happening like it did in that household. Her father, Greg, also spoke in part, saying this: "My deepest apologies to all the victims in the case. We, as the defendant's parents, do not condone any of these acts of violence against the victims, and we are also very sorry and apologetic to the child victim, the students and staff of West Side, and really the entire parish of Livingston Parish. I don't think there's ever been any question of the guilt of Cynthia, but we have always said it was done under distress. When she had kids, her kids became her life. All of a sudden, she dropped off the face of the earth. She married Dennis, and we stopped hearing from her. We also found out that Dennis physically abused her and that Cynthia was scared of Denny. The whole time they were together, we only saw Denny 5 times, and I remember him bragging about all his law enforcement connections. Later, I realized he was planting the seed in Cynthia's mind. I'm very sorry for all the victims. The primary victim is a member of our family who we love very much. I apologize to all the victims. I pray for their healing. Sorry to Judge Sledge. I'm sorry to even the prosecution that had to even look at all this filth. You shouldn't have to look at those things. I'm even sorry to the defense team that had to view this garbage. Especially sorry to the child victim number 1, whom we love dearly. My prayers are that everyone can move forward and we can all begin healing. When she is sentenced today, her whole family will be sentenced. Some will say justice was served, but true justice is served when it's not made with anger or rage, but with all the evidence and when a balanced and just decision is made. I'm truly sorry to everyone who had to even listen to these horrible crimes and much less view the evidence, and my prayer is we can begin the healing process." The part that really made me angry was him saying that the primary victim was Cynthia. No, it absolutely was not. Cynthia is a grown woman and was a willing participant in the events that occurred. Do you know who is a victim? Those sweet children who had no way to protect themselves. Or those adults that were harmed. That's who the real victims are. So I kind of already mentioned that the affidavit I had gone through already led me to believe that the younger child, victim number 1, was related to Cynthia and to Denny in some way. And Greg's statement seems to almost have confirmed that. The part of his statement where he said true justice is served when it's not made with anger or rage seemed a little tone deaf to me, though, in this situation. We should all be outraged and angry about what happened to these victims. But ultimately, a balanced and just decision was made to put her away for a long time based on the evidence. She doesn't deserve to get off the hook because there were possible toxic things happening between her and Denny. Like I said earlier, she is a grown adult and made her own bed, so now she can lie in it. I want to add that the victims were consulted on this plea deal as well and did feel as if it was a fair deal. Also, that it was a fair sentence given the length of it being 41 years. The father of one of the child victims read a letter that she had written for Cynthia. This letter read, "My life is so much better. I remember every time you hurt me and how scared I was to talk to you. I think of what my life would have been like with you still in it. You're a horrible and manipulating person. You are a selfish and horrible person. I hope you're ashamed of yourself and you rot in prison. I wrote this so you know you didn't break me down. You don't deserve to be a mom or even be free. You will forever be known as the person who hurt me." Another statement that was full of excuses was Cynthia's mother's statement. "You may think you know Cynthia Perkins, but you don't know our Cynthia. Our Cynthia is a caring and loving person that is loved by all that knows her. Why have we loved and supported her through all this? Because our Cynthia would never have done what all has come up. She was mentally and physically controlled by Dennis Perkins. I just ask that you see my Cynthia from my eyes, from my heart, and know that she's not the person that she's been made out to be. I love her and I will always love her, support her and believe in her." You can love your child to death and still hold them accountable for their behavior. You can love them so much and still not make excuses for their behavior, which there is absolutely no excuse for harming anyone in the manner that Cynthia did, especially when it comes to children. After her sentencing, Cynthia was sent to the Louisiana Department of Corrections to serve out her sentence. The DA and her attorney spoke out, and everyone seemed content with her sentence. Melanie was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and she was sentenced in March of 2022. The aggravated charge requires a mandatory life sentence. However, there is something called the Dorothy motion that would have allowed the judge to change the sentence if he had wanted to. And I was kind of shocked at how long she got compared to Cynthia, because remember, Cynthia's only doing 41 years. Not that she doesn't deserve to be punished, but I personally think that Cynthia deserves the life sentence and kind of got off a little easier, even though she had, from what has been released, more victims, including children. They are both deserving of harsh sentences, but I am guessing that because Melanie took it to trial and put the victim through all of that, the judge decided not to alter the sentence. The victim wrote a statement that was read for her in court, and this statement said, "What was done to me has changed me. I have had days I could not get out of bed. I avoided the news and social media to prevent any anxiety and panic attacks. The level of betrayal is hard to comprehend. To see my body and what you did to it is not okay. I don't think I will ever want to have sex again." Melanie also gave a statement right before her sentencing, and this statement in part read this: "Being here facing a life sentence has felt like preparing for my own death. It's surfaced thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are unspeakable. Today, March 21st, 2022, marks the hardest day I have ever had to prepare for. I never in my lifetime could have imagined I would be in a situation like this today or experience what I've lived through up to this very moment. I am so sorry and apologize from the bottom of my heart to all of those who worked on this case. I could have never imagined that upon my return to the New Orleans port February 1st, my life was changed forever, and a nightmare would begin. I would have a dozen officers from 3 agencies banging on the door before the sun even came up. Being abruptly worked, searched, and handcuffed, I was in sheer shock and thought this had to be a nightmare I just need to wake up from. I had no idea what was going on or why. I thought surely there was a mistake. They have the wrong person. I was so lost, confused, scared, shaking, and terrified. When I was asked if I would like to speak, I was speechless. I was told I was a fugitive and then would be transported to the parish the charges were in. I couldn't make sense of it. My thoughts were a fugitive is someone on the run. I'm not running from anyone or anything. Still in complete shock and speechless thinking this must be a huge mistake. Once I arrived to Livingston Parish Jail and booked there, I was told the charges I had were first-degree rape and video voyeurism. I was speechless and felt like I had left my body in absolute shock. I didn't understand. This can't be. Something isn't adding up or making sense. I would never hurt or harm or violate anyone. There was a lot more to her statement, and it was really long, but the summary is she had to backtrack what she did on November 8th of 2014. She had gone to a friend's house to watch football with her then-husband Jason and 2 boys when she started feeling bad and thought that she may be having an allergic reaction. Her husband took her to the emergency room because she was worried about her breathing and her symptoms. She spoke in her impact statement, saying that she didn't have an affair per se with Denny, but that there had been a couple isolated incidents 6 months to a year prior to this incident taking place. She said, and I quote, "When I learned he was married, I did not have any other relations with Denny. I am remorseful that this has happened, and I made the mistakes of believing and trusting Denny Perkins. I made a bad choice to go over to their house that night almost 8 years ago." She then said that she regretted not testifying to tell her story before asking the judge for mercy. She explained that she wants to be a mother and be involved daily in her kids' lives. She said that they had already lost their father and that her prayer was for a fresh new start. Now, what I noticed the most in her statement was that she never once apologized to the victim. It was all about her, how she would never knowingly do such a thing, and that she wanted the judge to be gentle on her. And after reading that, I do think that definitely could have impacted the judge's sentencing decisions. There was no remorse on her end, at least in my opinion. It was her totally trying to save face and not wanting her own life ruined, regardless of the fact that the poor victim's life has already been forever altered. Her sisters also all spoke, saying that her previous husband was harmful to her and that she was too trusting of Denny. They spoke of what a great person Melanie is, which I know is what impact statements are for, but it seriously seemed like no one was worried about the victims in any capacity here. Melanie's teenage son also spoke, and this is what his statement said.
My whole life, my mom has always been there for me. My mom has always tried to give me everything I have wanted, not just needed. She has been my safe person to be with, someone that I always knew I could go to. She is extremely caring to everyone. She would do anything for anyone. She is always positive. Without her in my life, I will miss her being a part of my college baseball career, meeting a girlfriend, getting married, having kids, all of the holidays. Those have been the most fun for her and us together. Her job is to be my mom, and it hurts that she has not been able to be that through all of this. She has already had to miss things that are important to me, and I wanted her to be part of. I want her to be there at my graduation this May. I want her out. I want her to be a part of my life. I want this nightmare to be over so we can have a stable life together.
Melanie's mother and boyfriend also spoke. Her boyfriend compared her to other people who have done worse things and faced a lesser sentence. He brought up Cynthia and how Cynthia's crimes included children and was voluntary with full awareness and cooperation. Now, regardless of all of the statements, I think the video seemed to prove otherwise in terms of it being voluntary and with full awareness and cooperation, or the outcome would have been much different. Melanie is currently serving her life sentence at Concordia Parish Correctional Facility. In a very shocking twist in all of this, Denny decided not to go to trial, and instead, he pled guilty in January of this year. As part of his plea deal, he pled guilty to a few of the charges and was sentenced to 100 years in prison, which ensures that he will never get out. According to the plea stipulations, he is also not eligible for parole or an appeal.
We felt satisfied that this accomplished justice, and we were able to get a win without putting the victims and this entire community, through the rigors of that trial that was going to happen next week.
Were the victims and their family members satisfied with this plea deal?
Absolutely. We took time to meet with each of them individually and make sure they fully understood all of the terms of the plea and that we had their blessing before going forward.
I think you guys said a few months ago that you guys were not going to give Dennis Perkins a plea deal. What changed in that?
Well, we didn't really offer him a plea deal. What happened was we were contacted by the defense. They made an offer, and at that point we considered it, and after some tinkering, we were able to come to an agreement that was accepted.
You talked about the victims too. How disturbing would this evidence be to come into a courtroom?
I mean, not just for the victims, but for the jurors who would have had to watch it. It would have been very disturbing, and that's why we're so happy that we were able to achieve what we did today without going through that.
Is this the worst evidence you've ever seen?
Personally, yes.
About how long ago did the defense reach out to y'all about plea deals?
About a week ago.
What were some of the compromises or charges that were dropped that were part of this?
There were a lot of charges that were dropped, and that's normal when you make a plea agreement. They came right off the bat and offered a number, 100 years, that we were willing to accept, that took care of our interests in protecting the public from Dennis Perkins, and that we felt the victims would be able to accept. And in exchange for that, charges get dropped in a plea deal.
Do you believe you guys could have even gotten a jury in this case, or would it have taken a while?
We do think we could have gotten a jury. We do. It may not have been easy, but we do believe that the citizens of this parish would have been able to be fair.
Do you believe justice was served?
We do.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, primarily protecting the public safety. No one has to worry about Dennis Perkins hurting anyone ever again. And the victims were consulted, and we're all okay with this, and we were okay with it. So yes, justice was served.
During his sentencing, the mother of one of the victims spoke, and she said this: "As parents and caregivers, it is our job to protect our kids from evil. I am not sure if there's anyone you care about besides yourself, but I hope you spend every day worrying about your own safety and the devastating effects of the deplorable actions you took. You will no longer have control over your victims anymore, and in the end, you're getting what you deserve." A victim impact statement means we're victims. You see, we are survivors. 3+ years later, I'm raising survivors, not victims. So here's my statement. I'm so thankful to not have to sit in this courtroom with you or your attorney ever again. Have a nice life in prison. Denny himself also gave a statement, saying the following: "I would like to say I'm sorry. I spent more than 3 years living in a box, and it's not about me. I just want to make the statement. Jesus Christ has forgiven me. I'm grateful for that. I hope and pray that anybody that this has affected finds hope and healing. I find it very interesting that he brought up Jesus, which is very common for defendants to do. It's a very reoccurring thing that we always see. But it's like, hi, I'm glad you believe in Jesus now and him forgiving you, but that's not the point. And I feel like everybody always goes to this right away, like, well, Jesus forgave me, as though it somehow is going to absolve them of what they've done, or it's going to make other people forgive them. It just happens way too often. Denny is currently serving his 100-year sentence. Well, basically his life sentence. And he's serving it in the David Wade Correctional Facility, which is a medium to high-risk security prison. After going through everything in this case, I can't help but wonder if there are more victims who just haven't been found or haven't come forward. And my heart honestly breaks for everyone that Denny, Cynthia, and Melanie have harmed. I truly hope that the three of them get everything that they deserve while they live the rest of their lives in prison. I know that this was a disgusting one today and a very brutal one and graphic, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me on it and listening all the way through. As a reminder, if you want to stay up to date with new true crime cases that I drop and case updates for cases you may have already listened to on this channel, make sure to pause really quick, take a brief second, hit that subscribe button below. It's absolutely free. It'll just make sure that anytime you're, just like scrolling on your YouTube, and if I post a new case video, it'll pop up in your feed. Also, for real-time case updates happening in real time, it's always easier for me to jump over on Instagram and post them on my stories there. So if you're not following along there, take a quick second to do that. It's @_Annie Elise. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in with me today, and I hope you appreciated the case coverage. Please give this video a thumbs up on your way out and comment with your thoughts below, and let's get the discussion going. All right, guys, until the next case, stay safe. Bye.